right, so I'm going to start this talk, and the point of the talk is I'm a developer. I hope everyone here is a developer. Most of you are developers. And I'm going to present a new way of collaborating. So a little bit about myself. So I'm on a personal mission for the last 10 years or so to help everyone safely contribute to any code base in minutes. So that's my goal. So I've been doing this goal with about 3 different hats. So I was an academic for a long time. Then I became sort of an engineer. And finally, more recently, I became an entrepreneur. So I had a really privilege to attend a lot of great universities and do research there. Also, be an engineer in quite well-known companies. And now I'm one of the founders of ReviewPAD, which is a small startup that is actually based here in Porto. And we are doing a developer tool. And the talk is really about what we are building. So, fluid pull requests. So, I'm going to tell you about why this talk. And the point is that pull requests are used by everyone, literally everyone nowadays. And they should be a superpower, and they are not. That's the kind of source of it. There's a lot of pain that comes associated with code reviews and pull requests. Then I go a little bit about the how. How can we change that? And how can we actually have the best pull request experience for everyone? And this is like a dream for a developer. When every time I talk with developers almost every day, and I talk about pull requests, and I see all sorts of horror stories. So I hope that after the talk you can come to me and tell me your horror stories and see how we can help. And then finally, the what. So what are we actually building and how we are trying to provide this user experience as a developer on pull requests. So let's start with the why. So if we start with the why, you need to go back and really understand, Git branching and pull requests, the origins of pull requests. And so this is all about collaboration, and we as developers are typically working in a team, even if we don't know the people that we're working with. So I'm going to introduce the team for the purpose of this talk. So we have here Robin Full, one element of the team, and the second element of the team, it's a very small team, it's Cat Stack, right? So these are the 2 people that are going to collaborate, and they have decided that they want to use Git for that, because they trust Linus, and Linus is God, so he knows what we should be doing. And so they start using Git, and when they do a Git clone, typically what they see is this sort of DAG, right, a graph, and you have nodes, and these nodes have successors and stuff like that. So the nodes are the commits, and then you have branching, right? So branches are nothing more than just references to particular commits. That's pretty much what Git tells you. And so you have basically colored nodes, and these are the branches. And what the developer typically does is the developer takes the main branch or whatever development branch, creates their own feature branches, and here we are kind of assuming that we are using feature branches, and then make some changes in those branches, and then at some point they would like to incorporate those changes, right? So that's typically what we are showing here, right? So I'm a developer, Robin comes and says, okay, I want to fix bug 400, so I pick my Jira ticket or whatever linear or whatever ticket system you're using, and branches off, makes a couple of commits, and now Robin is ready. And so when Robin is ready, essentially what Robin is saying is, I want to propagate the changes from my branch into the main branch. This is pretty much what Robin is saying. And what it means is, I want to perform this operation of git merge. So I want to basically take my changes, and I want to spread it into the actual product. And then Kat says, wait, 1 sec, no, we need to verify these changes, right? And this is the idea of, I need to do a code review. I need to stop Robin from simply saying git merge all the way and then continue doing the saying and stop the process here. So what are pull requests? This whole thing started because of open source, actually, right? So at some point, GitHub came about. I'm not sure how many people are here in the pre-GitHub era, but that was a kind of interesting era. But now, we use GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket, and GitHub basically popularized pull requests to help merge feature branches. That's the core essence of it. And this was fundamental for a couple of reasons. The first one is the review part. It provided you a nice UI where you could go and see the Git diff, and you could actually visualize the changes. And you don't have to send patches through email, which is quite crazy that people are still doing today. This kind of way of collaborating, of sending patches through email and doing code reviews through mailing lists, but this is still happening. The second aspect is you can actually have in this UI, you can discuss changes. It's very collaborative. So I can actually go and say, okay, line 55, I don't agree with this, please make this change, and then you have some discussion about the code. And then finally, you can actually control the merge procedure. And why is this important? It's very important, as it will appear, is because once you do the merge, you are basically saying, I lost control. I'm pushing the changes into the product. And now it's out of my hands. So you want to prevent people from just accidentally merging the code. So if you go actually to the origin of pull requests, it was made for a very specific purpose. Very, very specific purpose. And that purpose was, I'm operating on an open source project, so for me to publish some changes, the people don't know me, they need to verify that I'm trustworthy, I'm not a bad agent that comes here and starts making some mess. So at the core of it, it's about trust. So it's critical for contributions from untrusted parties in open source projects. Right? That was the whole origin of why pull requests were kind of revolutionary. It allowed people to collaborate on a global scale on open source. And that's basically why GitHub became so famous and so good. And so, a little bit about the popularity. So I took up the data from the public GitHub data source, and I compared, okay, what was the number of pull requests merged on the public repos in 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 2012, and until 2021. So in 2012, there were about 350,000 pull requests merged on public repos. That number increased massively, 10x at least, and because it's logarithmic scale here, and we are now about in 30 million. So show of hands that I don't know if people like very interactive here about show of hands. How many of you have opened a pull request in the last week? Okay, how many of you have opened 5 pull requests in the last week? 10. Wow, okay. That's a lot. So this whole point is, by the time I stop presenting this talk, there will be about 30,000 pull requests merged on GitHub alone. Right? So according to GitHub, in 2021, there were 170 million pull requests merged. And if you think about that, what actually they also tell you is that each of those pull requests had at a wait time of at least 1 hour on average. So that's 170 million hours of wait time. So I hope that I'm starting to get to the point. So to the point is that we took this mechanism of contributing in open source and we spread it out, everyone. In our startup, we are 4 developers and we use pull requests for everything. We don't use trunk-based development. There's no trust of like sometimes just pushing to master, but we still have to open a pull request to do it. And this is like a combination of 2 things. Open source is crazy in terms of like adoption, and so it's permeated to enterprises, to all sorts of companies. And the second thing that happened in the last 10 years was this advent of the DevOps era, right? So CI/CD took off. And so when CI/CD took off, basically what they realized is the pull request is a perfect place to start putting protection gates, right? To make sure that every developer cannot break master. That's the sort of golden rule, right? So whenever I block master and I make everyone open a pull request, and at least the pull request needs to run the CI, because I want to make sure that my Jenkins pipeline or whatever my build is passing, my tests are green, the coverage is good, and so it became more like almost like a control mechanism. So I say that pull requests nowadays are used in the sort of DevOps era to 3 things: you document, you automate, and you do audits. So you start running the CI, so the continuous integration on your pull requests. You continue to associate code reviews there. And if you talk with a lot of people, for them, code reviews and pull requests are the same thing. It's almost unfathomable for them to think about doing a code review outside of a pull request. People start acting really like you're crazy. To do a code review outside of a pull request? No way. I'm not going to do that. The third thing that happened was, again, we continue to use it to block the merge. And one of the main reasons why we do that is because we have associated deployments with the act of merging pull requests, right? So as soon as you merge your pull request, you're basically deploying, sometimes if you're doing CD, you're deploying to your users. So you really have to block people from doing accidental merges. So this is why nowadays pull requests are at the core. They are really the backbone of a lot of software development, and why they are so, so important. So let's look at just a little bit about the workflow. And so what happens? I open a PR, I trigger the CI. I ask for someone to review my code for me, so I'm going to the step of reviewing code. Then I do some rework. I typically get a review, I have to do some rework, and then I push my changes. And now the cycle starts again. And then I trigger the CI, I ask for someone to review again, and then I do some rework. If I'm lucky, a couple of days later, I actually get the approval. When I get the approval, I'm super happy. Okay, I can do the merge. Wait, typically, Git conflicts, okay, I have to fix, someone put something in master, bam, okay, I will have to go back to the beginning. Frustration, not so nice. Anyway, let's assume happy pass here, I get the approval, everything is good. And then I typically do the merge. This is what developers go through multiple times, some of you 10 times, more than 10 times a week, just to make sometimes very basic changes in code. And if you go back to the story, this was something very simple. You had someone who was doing some work, took some bug that you wanted to fix, made the actual work, and then simply said, okay, I'm ready. What my work is kind of done. And now you're being blocked there. So what is the core thing that we have observed at ReviewPAD? We observed that we are basically mixing automations with human collaboration here. You are taking a process which was supposed to be used for untrusted parties to collaborate with each other, and then you're putting a lot of automation into it, and then you are mixing where in step 2, Robin is to wait for Cat, and this wait time is sort of non-deterministic. It's not something like a CI check where I know that my build is taking 10 minutes, so I have to wait 10 minutes and I can come back. It's like, okay, you ask someone to review, and then maybe, it could come in 1 hour, it could come in 3 hours, it could come tomorrow, depending on your time zone, etc., etc. So you are introducing sort of this layer of wait time into something that is kind of ready to go. And so, at the core of it, the problem is that Robin, this developer, goes through the same process for every single PR. And so, what I really believe that I find it very not really easy to understand is why are we doing this? The trust that you have in your team is being totally undervalued. And the problem is that you are taking this mechanism of pull requests, which was supposed to be done for like open source projects. You are putting it inside of in your company with a team that you know everyone, but you're still using a mechanism that does not value that trust. So Robin needs to wait for Cat regardless of the changes. So from having this sort of superpower, you start to have a super bottleneck. And I'm going to show you 3 ways where we are seeing this bottleneck. The first one is you start to have lower throughputs. So when you measure things, and we measure them a lot of times in companies, for an average time to production of 9 days, so this is the moment developers start taking the ticket, the moment the actual code goes into production, average time of 9 days, it's not so crazy for some companies. 7 days are spent on code reviews. So it's an overwhelming amount of time where the pull requests are just there sitting, not doing anything. They're just sitting for people to just pick them up. And we have people producing 10 of them a week, sometimes 10 of them a day. So the problem is that they are just accumulating a lot. So we see very frequently, especially if you have like mono-repos architectures, companies with 300 pull requests open at all times. Crazy stuff. I mean, you see the list is like, I don't want to touch this. Second thing we see is you start to see higher failure rates. So one thing we've noticed is if you start measuring the quality of your code reviews, 50 to 90% of them are the thumbs up. That looks good to me. So you are blocking people, and then in return what you're getting is just a thumbs up. It's sort of like, yeah, this was good. And what's happening here? What's happening, and what happened in my case was, I was getting so many pull requests to review that I became completely like insensitive to them. I was like, I have to review everything, I don't have time, so I don't know how to prioritize them, so I'm just going to start doing kind of Skimming through the changes and thumbs up. Skimming through the changes, thumbs up. This is what people are doing. So the quality of the code starts decreasing after a while. And finally, what we start seeing in organizations is just developer frustration. If we as developers take 2 weeks to merge a simple code change, why? Why are we optimizing build times to go from 10 minutes to 3 minutes, and we are super proud of that, but we're not taking care of the actual problem, which is I cannot put my changes as fast as I want them to. This is something it's a question for you, and I really want to understand what's happening here. So I took these 3 metrics because they are part of this DORA metrics, which, this initiative by Google to say, okay, let's try to measure what are elite teams that can deliver good quality software. And so that's why I think these metrics are important. So let's go into the how. How can we provide the best experience for everyone? And you can take one solution, which is the David Farley solution, one of the fathers of continuous deployments, which is, he has a lot of YouTube videos that say, don't use pull requests. This thing is nonsense. What people need to be doing is what they know since the beginning, which is pair programming, mob programming, trunk-based development. Those are the best practices, and that's it. So basically what he's saying is that everyone that is doing this in the industry is basically fundamentally wrong, the way we are collaborating. We need to go back to the way it was. I think that we shouldn't take that approach. There's many reasons why we shouldn't take that approach. I do believe that pull requests are useful. I think they're widely misused. But if you have an environment as we have today, where we have people working remotely, people working with like open source sort of old culture, it's very hard to work without pull requests. And now with the advent of AI, when we start having your AIs creating pull requests, there is no way that you can trust. You need a way to block things. So if you go back to the image, basically what we are saying is something very, very simple. So what is the core idea of fluid pull requests is that Robin doesn't have to go through the same process for every PR. So for example, if I take one scenario, take a minor documentation change, I don't have to go through the same thing. Basically, I don't need a review. So I can, basically, Robin makes a change, opens the PR automatically is approved, and then Robin can merge. If, for example, I'm deprecating an API, if Robin knows what he's doing, then why can't the code review be done after the merge? So I simply allow people to merge the code, and then I can review the code after. And I can have a mechanism in place in my team to do that. Or even a third scenario. Now I'm doing a critical database migration. We see this all the time. People doing crazy things, and then, because they apply the same process, things start slipping the cracks. Here, if I have a critical database migration, what I'd like to do is to actually say, I want to have an extra reviewer after CAT approves. So I want to actually put more, a way to block more in this case. I want to have more safety. So that's the idea of fluid pull requests. It's an extension of pull requests with predefined rules to automate manual actions. So you want to basically automate even further, and you want to create different policies so that depending on who changed what, when, and why, I can actually have different code review practices. What's the goal? The goal is very simple. Me as a developer, I want a consistent and transparent experience that minimizes the wait time between developers. That's basically what we're trying to achieve here. When we talk with developers a lot, they say, if I open a PR at 9 a.m., the experience that I have is very different than if I open it at 3 p.m. Or I don't even know exactly, it could be the same exact thing. And this kind of inconsistency doesn't bring good quality to your processes. So what are the benefits for you? 4 benefits. You wait less, which is great. We don't like to wait, we are developers. Second thing is, you actually can do code reviews that matter to you. This is something that might look small, but it's quite big, because you don't want to be bothered, context switched to something that you don't care about. The third one is that you can focus on the process. Instead of focusing on things that don't really matter, you can focus on the actual process, which is, I've done this task, which was repetitive, I can automate that. And fourth, you can actually have this consistent experience. If you're trying to sell this kind of idea to your team, what are the benefits for them? Again, 4 benefits. You can have shorter development cycles. Developers wait less, so they can ship things faster. Then they can also increase their security. As I mentioned, for example, in database case, migration case, you can actually have extra layers of security. Third one is that you can have more compliance. So compliance can be embedded into the process, and that can be very important for large organizations. And fourth, you can actually achieve higher code quality. So we are now going to the what, which things will get a bit more interesting. So now I'm going to show you what basically we are actually building based on this idea of fluid pull requests. So, and this goes into ReviewPAD. So what is ReviewPAD? ReviewPAD is a GitHub service to help team implement fluid pull requests. So how do you do that? You write a spec which lives in your GitHub repo. Okay, it's a file. And we are going to go through this file. Then, based on this file, the service itself are going to apply all these automations. So it's going to allow you to specify different types of lanes of pull requests. It really allows you to smoothly transition from what pull request mechanism you have now to this idea of fluid pull requests. And fourth one, we are big believers in open source. So the core library is actually open source, and you can check it out on GitHub. So it's on GitHub ReviewPAD/ReviewPAD. So, talked a lot, so let's go to some practical examples before I really go to the demo. Suppose I want to auto-merge pull requests. Okay, so I want to have simple changes. I want them to be completely auto-merged. Ideally, what I want to do is something like this. I want to have a workflow that say, okay, if my pull request only has file extensions MD, markdown, then merge. It can be as simple as this. So you can put this spec into your GitHub repo, and that's it. You open a PR, it only touches markdown, bam, you're done. Now let's look at more interesting cases. Suppose I want to do some automatic reviewer assignments. It can be, we have found an organization where it's a full-time job for a person to find out who is the right person to review what. It's crazy. People are opening PRs, and their job is to say, okay, this PR goes to that person, this PR goes to that person. Full-time job. And imagine, like, it's like this sort of, you know, remember these people that were doing the telephone thing, like just take a cable and put it, and like take a cable and putting it? I mean, it's crazy. What we'd like to do is something like this. First of all, don't bother developers if the PR is not ready. Sounds simple, but it's very often that people are being bothered to go to look at some pull request, and the pull request is kind of like, the build is failing, doesn't have any description, nothing. Something simple you can do with ReviewPAD is this. If the pull request is not in draft, and the description is not empty, for example, then I want to assign a code author reviewer. What is this assigned code author reviewer? It's a built-in in our ecosystem, and what it does, and this receives 3 arguments. The first one is how many people do you want to review? And here it says 1. Then the second argument is a list of people you want to exclude. For example, I want to exclude the CTO. I don't want the CTO to ever be bothered to review some code. So I'm not excluding anyone here. And then the third parameter is something a little bit more interesting. So what we find out is that when you're doing a review assignment, a lot of times it's the same person reviewing all the PRs. It's a team lead. The team lead is reviewing pretty much all the time, all the PRs. So when this person leaves the company or moves to another team, the quality of the code reviews drops dramatically. The knowledge is concentrated in one person. So what this tool is saying is that you are basically going to assign at most to the same person 2 pull requests to review. So you want to spread the load across all the team. So in 5 lines of code, you can basically have a policy that tells you, okay, if a pull request is ready for review and it has a description, then I want to spread across according to Git blame, for example, and our mechanism of assigning the reviewers in an even way. More interesting things. Can block the merge dynamically. What does it mean? For example, suppose I have a group of a person, which is the compliance lead. It's me, it's Marcelo. Then we can have a couple of rules. So it's a declarative way of specifying these policies. So I have 2 rules here. The first one is touches the license. So if the pull request has a file name license, this will be true. And the second rule is not core author. So if the author of the pull request is not an element of these compliant leads. Basically saying that the author of the PR is not Marcelo. Then you can have a very simple workflow, which is if the rule touches license is true and is not an author, a core author, then I want to fail the PR. So I don't want to have people that don't have the permissions to go and modify the license. And what does this fail do? What these fails do, it allows you to connect with GitHub such that you can have a branch protection rule that makes sure that when you are in the PR itself, your merge button is blocked. So you can basically block developers from doing unwanted merges. And you have a very flexible way of doing this with this ecosystem. How can you improve security? So now we are going deeper and deeper into the capabilities of the system. So suppose you have a piece of code. Sorry, it's Go. We are kind of back-end developers. It's not, imagine it's TypeScript. What you can do is following, or JavaScript. You can take a piece of code, you can make a simple code comment, which is just ReviewPAD n of annotation, and say a tag, for example, critical. And then what ReviewPAD does is, when you create a pull request that only modifies part of this code, it knows the context. So it will know that I'm modifying the function run action. How can you connect this to your code review system? Very simple. You can have a workflow that says, if the pull request is modifying a function which was tagged with critical, then I want to have a different code review process altogether. And this is not just syntactic sugar, this is a semantic thing. It actually finds out that you are changing part of the functionality. If I add just white spaces and stuff like that, it's not going to do anything. And here I can basically do a couple of actions on GitHub. I can add labels, I can assign deeper types of reviewers, I can even put a comment on the pull request tagging someone to not be the reviewer. So it's a very flexible system. And since we are living in an age of AI, we are also building AI. So what can you do? You can do something as simple as this. I have a workflow, which is a summarize, which is whenever you open a pull request, I want to have a summary there. What is this summary doing? It's basically adding a summary in your pull request with the actual changes using GPT-4. Okay? So let's look at the demo. What I'm going to show you now is in a couple of minutes, how can you get this thing up and running? So you go to reviewpad.com, you install ReviewPAD for GitHub. I authorize, so I'm signing up. And now I'm going to install ReviewPAD on a repo, which is a repo that I'm going to use for this demo, which is called Fest.dev Demo. So I'm going to install ReviewPAD. So when I install, I'll go back to the docs. And so now I'm in the repo now. And the first thing that ReviewPAD will do is it will create itself a pull request to onboard you on ReviewPAD. So what this pull request is doing is creating the configuration file for you. You don't even have to do anything. You just have to click buttons. Okay? So there's a bunch of workflows that are already there. And I'm just going to... And then what you can also see is if you have pull requests open, it will tell you what it will do on the pull requests that are already open. So I have one pull request which is open, and it will tell me I'm going to link the commit messages, I'm going to add some warning label message, I'm going to add some labels, I'm going to add a comment, so on. So let's see this in action. I'm going to merge the pull request. And now I'm going to go back to the beginning, because I have a pull request open here. So this pull request was completely empty before, right? I don't have anything here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to update the branch with a rebase. I'm going to pull in now the changes of ReviewPAD. So what's going to happen now is that ReviewPAD is going to start running. So ReviewPAD now is running. It's going to be a GitHub check. And then we start to see magic, right? Because automation will start to happen. So it takes a little bit of time because it's pulling a lot of data from different places. And it's a live demo. Of course, it wants to make me a little bit bad. So the first thing it does, it gives me an AI-generated summary. So it says this pull request updates the README with 4 new lines. Okay, it's not very nice. It adds a link for the slides to a related talk and a link to the ReviewPAD website for further information, which is pretty much what I'm doing here. So if I'm the reviewer now, I can basically come into these changes with a lot more context that I didn't have before. And then it gives me all these sort of automations for free. Right, so all the labels, tells me that it's a documentation because I'm just modifying the README. It thanks me for the first contribution, and it's basically telling me, look, you have a warning. You need to put a link to a GitHub issue because otherwise you won't be compliant. So this is basically what you can get. And now let me show a little bit something more interesting. So I have a branch in this repo, and I'm going to create a pull request out of that branch. That branch is going to add some code. It's some Go code. I'm just going to create it and then we'll be able to see what ReviewPAD is going to start doing. So it's doing the same thing. You can see here there are 6 files that are being modified. And if I'm a developer, typically I have to go into the changes themselves, right? I have to go and understand, okay, what are these changes about? I have a couple of files here. You continue on and so on. Okay, AI-generated summary. This pull request introduces the initial command line interface CLI for the project. It had 6 files. These are the files. And now the main functionalities include checking if the commit matches respect conventional commits, installing Git hooks, setting up root comments, etc., etc. I have my summary here. So I have basically ReviewPAD up and running. And now let me show you something that might be even more interesting. So most of you don't know, I would imagine, a lot of Go. So say you are reading this code for the first time. And you say, okay, what is going on here? I don't know what this thing is. It would be nice if I could simply say something like, okay, ReviewPAD. We have this AI agent, which we call Robin, and I just basically want to ask a question. I could simply say, explain to me the function. So I'm making a comment, and now what I would expect is exactly an explanation of this, right? And so we'll wait a little bit, and now Robin is doing his magic, so he's taking care of understanding the code and providing an explanation for you. And it will come back with something about the code changes themselves. So while it's doing that, let me just show you how powerful this AI summarization can be. So very recent ago, what we did was we modified 145 files in one pull request of ours, which is completely crazy for someone to go and review. Right? So you have all these changes in all these files, and if you look at just the generated summary, it's spot on. And this thing is scary. So it's so spot on that even our team member starts to give hearts to it. Right? So the level of automation that you can get out of these tools, it's just completely crazy nowadays. Okay, so I have asked that get. And here's my explanation, right? So the function is responsible for finding and returning the root directory of the Git repository. And now here's a breakdown on how it works. So think of this as if you're reviewing code, like having someone next to you just that you can ask questions and interact with. And this thing is evolving at a very fast pace, because now I could simply say, okay, what do you think about code quality, right? So I can continue the story. Is there any improvement to the code? Right? So now I'll get some improvements of the code, and then later on what I could, for example, say is, okay, fix me. Create me a commit that does that. Right? So this is the kind of thing we are building at the moment. With these AI agents, what you can start doing is not only you have the automation, and you can specify this automation. Just to give you an idea, for example, in our own project, on ReviewPAD, if I go here, we have our own file. These files can grow quite a bit, so you can also extend files, so you can basically have one single file, which is your organization file, which is all the policies, and then you can have just different GitHub repos that just extend that one. So if I show you the common one, essentially what I can show you is that these things can become very, very complicated, but also very nice, because if I go to the reviewer assignment, here is basically how we do the reviewer assignment at ReviewPAD. So if the PR is still in draft, don't ask anyone to do anything. The developer needs to do something. If you have too many pull requests open, don't bother anyone. You have to basically try to close the pull request that you have currently open, more than 3. If you have some kind of, don't have the change type, so this is basically a kind of checks, a way of, a kind of a pipeline, where if you go bottom, when you ask someone to review your code, this person already knows that all these checks are done. It's the same thing as saying, okay, I know that when I go and review this code, I already have all this sort of unified experience. I know that the commits are properly formatted, I know I have a description, I know that the code is in good quality, and I just have to focus on the thing that really matters. Okay, so now what we got back, overall the code looks good and follows structural approach using Cobra CLI, which is a framework that I have, and then it gives me a couple of suggestions. And now, basically, as a reviewer, I have this extra tool to basically, without leaving GitHub, to communicate and to have much better experience as a developer. And with that, I think we are done. So thank you so much, and please talk to me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Marcelo. Again, we're a little bit short of time, but still have some time for questions. So yeah, please join me on the couch. So we do have some really cool questions here. And the first one, of course, it's from Rodrigo. It's, how do you see artificial intelligence in the pull request workflow?
Well, I hope that the talk was a little bit about already that. So I think we are about to witness the most exciting time to be a developer. That's the belief that we have. The level of superpowers that we are able to start to provide to people using AI. I guess AI, we talk about mostly large language models, but I think it goes over the scope of many other things that we already are building. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Awesome, awesome. So the next question is from Daniele Costa. And we saw you talking a lot about GitHub, but is this available for other Git platforms like GitLab or Bitbucket?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the moment, yeah.
Is it a great question?
It's a good question. It's a good
question.
It's a question we have a lot, which is, this is about GitHub. When are you going to support GitLab and Bitbucket? I think that we have the infrastructure, so we already have the APIs. At the same time, we are a small startup, right? And what we realize is that when you start supporting, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and then people start using things like GitLab self-hosted with versions that are like 5 years ago, and they start asking you for crazy things, your resources as a startup start to become very, very small. So the bet at the moment is to okay, let's try to prove value, complete value on GitHub, and then, GitLab and Bitbucket, they'll, once we have enough people using it, will be more like, okay, integration and getting it to work. But GitLab is going to come soon, especially this AI stuff, because GitHub is also providing some stuff with AI. So of course we want to differentiate a bit more there on GitLab.
Okay, awesome. So next question is from Ricardo. Is fluid pull requests supposed to be implemented with unexperienced developer teams? How would it be implemented?
Yeah, that is a very good question.
That is a very good question. Ricardo, where are you, man?
Yeah.
Man, you got the prize for a very good question. Then later on, talk to me, okay? Awesome.
So what we believe is that it is for any kind of team, and what we're trying to provide is what I was trying to show you. In like 5 minutes, how can you get all the best practices of pull requests for you without having to think so much about it? So the service itself, so fluid pull request is about an idea. And the idea is that not every pull request is the same. So don't apply the same kind of methodology for any type of change with anyone. So this flexibility can be controlled. So, and that's pretty much what we're trying to do. So to allow you to specify as much as you want, but if you don't want to specify anything, just want to use the black box, here is a button, click on this template, use it, and now you don't have to think. Like all the labeling is done for you, all the reviewers are done for you, all the nice merges are done for you, and then you as a developer can just enjoy.
Awesome, awesome. And from Thiago, how can you manage conflicts or disagreements that arise during a fluid pull request review process?
Yeah, so that is also a very good question, because most of the problems that sometimes arise in pull requests or code reviews are cultural, right? It's people communicating, right? It's a collaboration process. When I was working in static analysis way before this was kind of popular with linters and stuff like that, and one time someone told me something I never forget, which was why linters are so famous and so popular. It's because you cannot argue with a machine. Before linters, people were doing the job of a linter, and they would say, oh, white space here, oh, camel case there, and then it would be like, oh, this person is so annoying, come on, always. And then as soon as you start putting that into the automation, people stop complaining, they simply follow the rules. So my advice is, if it's a cultural problem of like the code quality itself, try to automate that as much as you can. If it's an architectural problem, I think that if you are seeing that in the code review step, something else is broken. So it's not going to be fluid pull requests that are going to fix that. It's all about how you're actually doing software development as a whole. Another thing we see a lot is people complain about pull requests are too big to review. Are the pull requests too big to review? But is the source of that because the ticket is not well specified? So who is, is the problem of the developer or is the problem of the product manager or the PO? And those are the kind of things that you can start to understand a little bit more once you start, for example, having labels where a label with the size, people love the label with the size. Why? Because now they can show in their sprints, all the PRs are large. It cannot be our problem. Come on, we are not all bad developers. It's a problem of something else, and the something else is spec.
Yeah. One of the last questions, and still about this cultural process that you've been talking about, is from Luan. How do you make your team understand that code review is important?
That's a strange question for me because I've been writing code analyzers for a long time, and I've seen a new trend, which is people are saying code reviews as they are done today, they don't have any value, and I sort of relate to that because when you start doing these measurements and you see, okay, 90% of the code reviews looks good to me, and the other 10% they are just like adding in one. The percentage of code reviews that actually lead to code changes is astronomically small. So all the code reviews that you are doing, the impact that you have on the code quality is very small. What I would say though is if you only care about code quality, I think there are other ways that you can be more impactful. But if you care about knowledge sharing, code reviews are a great place to do that. Because the act of code review goes way beyond just code quality. And that's something very hard for managers and CTOs to understand. This idea that if people don't understand their code, they will not be able to change them, maybe not in next week, but in 3 months when people start to leave. So churn of knowledge is a real problem. And going back to the first question, I think the most fundamental thing that we as developers are going to face is that we are going to lose control of our code bases at a very, very fast pace with AI. When this thing starts, even Copilot produced, I think, 40% of the code, according to GitHub, in many organizations. And that 40% of the code is just boilerplate. It's just like, things that you already know that are correct. But what's going to happen next is that we're going to start losing control of architectural things. People are going to simply say, oh, with AI, I can take an issue and get a pull request. And then I have to go and review. So code reviews are going to become perhaps of course, I'm biased. We are building a code review tool. But we really believe that in the next 12 months, every developer whose job will fundamentally shift from producing code to reviewing code. And we need better tools for that.
For sure, for sure. And speaking of tools, the last question from Ricardo. Are there costs to use ReviewPAD?
Yeah, so there are costs. There are mostly costs on our side. No, I'm joking. So the tool is free for open source projects. And for private repos, it's a subscription-based service per number of developers. So it's a normal, developer tool kind of pricing model. We're just getting started. I don't want to claim that we're not JetBrains. We're not pumping products every 3 months. So we are a small startup. We have a big dream, but we need your help. So as developers, we need help to get feedback, to understand if our building makes sense for you. Because at the end of the day, why we're doing this is really because of our mission. We want to help developers change their lives. We don't want them to wait. This is something that we were facing ourselves. So pull requests were nonsense the way we were doing them. So we believe there's a better way of doing that, and we can spread that message across the globe.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. So I hope you guys reach Marcelo to understand a little bit better about ReviewPAD, and that's wrapping the questions. Thanks a lot, Marcelo.